Hello viewers, welcome to my class. This is Usha Sharma. I will start chapter 6 Bhakti Sufi tradition 8 to 18th century from themes in Indian history part 2. During this period, a large number of gods and goddesses in sculpture as well as in text appeared. This indicated the continued and extended worship of the major deities such as Vishnu, Shiva, and the goddesses visualized in a variety of forms. The integration of cults. Historians who have tried to understand these developments suggest that there were at least two processes at work. One was a process of disseminated Brahmanical ideas. This was exemplified by the composition, compilation, and preservation of Puranic texts in simple Sanskrit words. They were meant to be accessible to women and Shudras who were excluded from Vedic learning. There was a second process at work, that of the Brahmanas accepting and reworking the beliefs and practices these and other social categories. Through an example, we can say that a local deity whose image was and continues to be made of wood by local tribal specialists was recognized as a form of Vishnu. These local deities were often incorporated within the Puranic framework by providing them with an identity as a wife of the principal male deities. Sometimes they were equated with Lakshmi, the wife of Vishnu. A new form of worship, that's Tantric worship. Tantric worship. The form of worship often associated with goddess were classified as Tantric. It was widespread in the subcontinent. It was open to women and men. Those who followed Tantric rejected the caste and class within the ritual context. Many of these ideas influenced Shaivism and the Buddhism. Difference between Vedic and Tantric tradition. There were conflict between those who followed the Vedic tradition and those who practiced the Tantric way of worshipping deities. Those who valued Vedic tradition often condemned the practices that went beyond the performance of sacrifices and chanting of mantras. On the other hand, those who engaged in Tantric practice ignored the authority of the Vedas. Early traditions of Bhakti. The historians of religion classified Bhakti tradition into two broad categories, Saguna and Nirguna. Saguna included tradition that focused on the worship of specific deities such as Shiva, Vishnu and his avatars, and form of the goddess or Devi. Nirguna Bhakti, on the other hand, was worship of an abstract form of God. The Alvars and Nayanars of Tamil Nadu. During the 6th century, some of the Bhakti movements were led by the Alvaras and the Nayanaras. The literal meaning of the Alvars is those who are immersed in devotion of Vishnu, and Nayanaras is those who were devotees of Shiva. They travelled from place to place singing hymns in Tamil in praise of their god. During their travels, the Alvars and Nayanaras identified certain shrines as abodes of their chosen deities. Later, big temples were built at those places and developed as pilgrimage centers. Attitude towards caste. According to some historians, the Alvars and the Nayanars started a movement of protest against the caste system and the Brahmanas and attempted to reform the system. The devotees came from the different social backgrounds such as artisans, cultivators and even form of the caste that were considered untouchable. Composition of the Alvars and Nayanars are considered to be as important as the Vedas. For instance, one of the anthologies of composition of the Alvars, the Nalira Divya Prabandham, was described as the Tamil Veda, and the text was significant like the Vedas that were used by the Brahmanas. Opposition to Buddhism and Jainism. The saint poets, the Alvars and the Nayanars were opposed to Buddhism and Jainism. This hostility is well marked in their compositions, particularly of the Nayanars. Historian says that his conflict was due to competition between members of different religious traditions for royal patronage. Women devotees. One of the striking features of these traditions was the presence of women. For example, there was a saint poet called Andal, a woman Alvar. Her compositions were sung and sung even today. Another woman, Kraikal Ammayar, a devotee of Shiva, adopted the path of extreme asceticism to attain her goal. Her compositions were preserved within the Nayanara's tradition. These women renounced their social obligation but did not become nuns. Their presence was a challenge of patriarchal norms. Relation between Bhakti saints and the state. The Chola rulers supported the Bhakti tradition and built temples for Shiva and Vishnu. Some of the magnificent temples for Shiva, such as temple as Chidambaram, Tanjavur and Gangekondcholpuram, were constructed under their patronage. The Chola rulers built temples often to claim divine support and proclaim their own power and status, and adorned those temples with stone and metal sculpture to represent the vision of the popular saints. They also made the spectacular representation of Shiva in bronze sculpture. The Chola king introduced the singing of Tamil Shiva hymns under royal patronage, taking the initiative to collect and organize them into a text, Tavarram. According to inscriptional evidence, the Chola king Parantaka I had constructed the metal image of Apar Samandaram and Sundarar in a Shiva temple. These were carried in procession during the festival of these saints. Next tradition, the Veer Sheva in Karnataka. During the 12th century, the Veer Sheva's movement was started by a Brahmana named Basvana. He was a Jaina and a minister in the court of a Chalukya king. His followers were known as Veer Shevas or Lingayatas. Lingayatas and their beliefs. Lingayatas are an important community even today. They worship Shiva in the form of linga. They wear a small linga in a silver case over the left shoulder. Jangama or wandering monk are revered. Lingayatas believe that after that, the devotee will be united with Shiva and will not return to this world. Therefore, they do not practice funerary rites such as cremation. Challenges to the caste system. The Lingayatas challenged the idea of caste and the pollution attributed to some groups by Brahmanas. They also questioned the theory of rebirth. Their opposition to caste system won them number of followers who were marginalized within the Brahmanical social order. The Lingayatas also practiced certain approval that were rejected by the Dharma Shastras, such as post-puberty marriage and the remarriage of widow. Our knowledge about the Veer Sheva's tradition came from Vachanas, composed in Kannada by those who joined the movement. Religious ferment in North India. According to historians, in North India, there was a period when several Rajput states emerged and in most of these states, Brahmanas occupied important place by performing rituals. There was no attempt to question their position directly. At the same time, there were other religious leaders who were out of the orthodox Brahmanical system and were gaining ground. These includes the Naths, Jogis and Siddhas. Many of them came from artisanal groups such as weavers who were well organized. These religious leaders questioned the authority of the Vedas. However, they were unable to win the support of the ruler elites. Turkish conquest culminated in the establishment of the Delhi Sultanate. The power of many Rajput rulers was thus undermined, and also of the Brahmanas who were associated with those kingdoms. The coming of the Sufis was a significant part of the developments. Muhammad bin Qasim conquered Sindh in 711 AD. Sindh became a part of the Khalifa domain. During the 13th century, the Turks and Afghans established the Delhi Sultanate. Sultanates were also formed in the Deccan and other parts of the subcontinent. Islam was recognized as the religion of several areas. This continued with the establishment of the Mughal Empire. Muslim rulers were to be guided by the ulama, which were expected to ensure that they ruled according to the Sharia. The Jimmi means protected and is derived from the Arabic word zimma, protection. It was developed for people who followed revealed scriptures such as the Jews and Christians and lived under Muslim rule. They paid a tax called jizya and received protection from Muslims. In India, this status was extended to Hindus as well. In general, rulers often adopted a flexible policy towards their subject. For example, several rulers gave land endowment and granted tax exemptions to Hindu, Jaina, Zoroastrians, Christians and Jewish religious institutions. They also showed respect and devotion towards non-Muslim religions. The popular practices of Islam. The 5 pillars of faith in Islam. Those who adopted Islam follow 5 pillars of faith. Number 1, there is one God, Allah, and Prophet Muhammad is his messenger. Second, offering prayers 5 times a day. Third, giving alms. 4, fasting during the month of Ramzan. 5th, performing the pilgrimage of Makkah to Makkah. The universal features of Islam declined due to these sectarian practices and the influence of local customary practice. For example, Arab Muslim traders who settled Malabar coast adopted Malayalam language and matrilineal system. The best example of the blending of a universal faith and local tradition is mosque. The architectural features of mosque are universal and the minbar. There are variations such as roof and building materials. The growth of Sufis. Sufis were a group of religious-minded people in Islam. They were critical of the dogmatic definitions and scholastic method of interpreting the Quran. They emphasized interpretations of Quran on the basis of personal experience. By the 11th century, Sufism evolved into a well-developed movement with a body of literature on Quranic studies and Sufi practices. Sufism was organized in an institution around the hospice or khanqah, controlled by a teaching master known as Sheikh, Pir or Murshid. He enrolled disciples and appointed a successor. He established rules for spiritual conduct and interaction between inmates as well as between layperson and the master. Dargah is a Persian term. Its meaning is tomb shrine. When the sheikh died, his tomb shrine became the center of devotion for his followers. This encouraged the practice of pilgrimage or ziyarat to his grave, particularly on his death anniversary. It was believed that after death, the soul of sheikh get united with the soul of Allah. People sought their blessing to attain material and spiritual benefits. Thus evolved the cult of the sheikh, reversed as wali. Silsila, literally meaning a chain, signifies a continuous link between master and disciple, stretching as an unbroken spiritual genealogy of the Prophet Muhammad. Sufi silsila began to appear in different parts of the Islamic world around the 12th century. The Chishtis in the subcontinent. Life in the Chishti Khankaha. The Khankaha was the center of social life. It comprised several small rooms and a big hall where inmates and visitors lived and prayed. The sheikh lived in a small room on the roof of the hall where he met visitors in the morning and evening. There was an open kitchen. From morning till evening, people from all walks of life came to seek the blessing from the sheikh in various matters. Other visitors included poets such as Amir Hussain Sizi and Amir Khusro and the court historian Ziauddin Barni, and all of them wrote about the sheikh. The practices that were adopted by the Chishtis in their Khanqah: bowing before the sheikh, offering water to visitors, shaving the head of initiates, yogic exercise. Sheikh Nizamuddin Aulia appointed his disciple to set up hospice in various parts of the subcontinent. In this way, they came in touch with the people, which led to the popularization of Chishti practices, teachings, and also the fame of Sheikh. Chishti devotionalism, Ziyarat and Qawwali. Pilgrimage called Ziyarat, tomb of Sufi saints, is prevalent all over the Muslim world. This practice is an occasion for seeking the Sufi's spiritual grace. For more than 7 centuries, people from different walks of life express their devotion at the Dargah of the 5 great Chishti saints. The use of music and dance, including mystical chants performed by specially trained musicians or qawwal to evoke divine ancestry, is also part of ziyarat. The Sufi remember God either by reciting the zikr or evoking his presence through sama or performance of mystical music known as qawwali. Sheikh Moinuddin Chishti. Akbar, the Mughal emperor, visited Dargah at Ajmer 14 times in his life, and these visits were aimed at seeking blessing for new conquest, fulfilling his of woe, and to get son. Many of his wishes were soon fulfilled, and thus as an offering he gave generous gift to each visit. He offered a huge cauldron to facilitate cooking for pilgrims. He even got a mosque constructed within the Dargah. Dargah of Khwaja Moinuddin. The most popular Dargah is that of Khwaja Moinuddin, popularly known as Garib Nawaz. The Dargah became so popular because of the following reason: the austerity and purity of the Sheikh, greatness of his spiritual successor, and the patronage of royal visitors. Location of Ajmer was another factor for its popularity, as it was located on the trade route connecting Delhi and Gujarat. It attracted members of travelers. Muhammad bin Tughlaq was the first sultan to visit the Dargah. Language and communication. The Chishtis composed their poems in several languages. The Chishti used Hindvi or Persian language. Sufis such as Baba Farid composed poetry in local language. Some Sufis composed long poems or masnavis to express ideas of divine love using human love as an allegory. Sufi poetry was composed in the Dakhani language around the Bijapur and Karnataka region. Women, while performing household chores like grinding grain and spinning, sang these poems. Other poems were in the form of Lori Nama or wedding song Shadi Nama. The Sufis of this region were inspired by the Kannada Vachna of the Lingayatas and the Marathi Abhangs of the saint of Padhanpur. Relation between Sufis and the state. The Chishti traditions was austere, but it did not isolate political power. The Sufis accepted unsolicited grants and donations from the political elites. The sultans set up charitable trusts as endowments or for hospices and granted tax-free land. The Chishtis accepted donation in cash and kind and used for their immediate requirements such as food, clothes, living quarters and ritual necessities such as sama. The moral high status of the Sufis attracted people from all walks of life. The kings wished to secure their support. Kings simply did not need to show their association with Sufis and also required legitimating for them. When the Turks set up the Delhi Sultanate, Sufi resisted the insistence of the ulama on imposing Sharias as state law because they anticipated opposition from their subjects. The sultans also came to depend on the Sufis to interpret the Sharias. It was believed that Aulia could intercode with God to improve the material and spiritual condition of the people. As a result, kings got the shrines of the Sufis near built their tombs. There were instances of conflict between the sultans and the Sufis. To assert their authority, both expected certain ritual performed like kissing of the feet, etc. New devotional paths, dialogues and descents in North India. During the 14th and 15th century, Kabir was one of the most outstanding examples of a poet sent verse ascribed to Kabir have been compiled in their distinct tradition. The Kabir Bijak is preserved by the Kabir Panth in Varanasi and in Uttar Pradesh. Kabir Granthavali is associated with the Dadu Panth in Rajasthan, and many of his compositions are found in the Adi Granth Sahib. All these compilations were made after the death of Kabir. Kabir's poems have survived in several languages and dialects and sometimes with special language of Nirguna poets and others known as Ulat Basi. Teaching of Kabir's. Kabir tried to describe the ultimate reality, including Islam. According to him, the ultimate reality was Allah, Khuda, Hazrat, and Pir. He also used certain Vedic terms such as Brahman and Atman. He also used some yogic traditional terms such as Sabha or Sunya. Some poems of Kabir expressed conflicting and diverse ideas. Some poems attacked Hindu polytheism and idol worship, and others used Sufi concept of zikr and ishq to express the Hindu practices of Nam Simran. Historians have tried to analyze the language, style and content of these poems. Debates about whether Kabir was a Hindu or a Muslim by birth are well reflected in hagiographies. Hagiographies within the Vaishnava tradition suggest that he was born a Hindu, Kabir Das, but brought up by a poor Muslim community of weavers. They also suggest that he was initiated into bhakti by a Guru Ramanand. The poem of Kabir use words Guru and Sadguru but don't mention the name of any specific Guru. Historians pointed out that it is very difficult to establish that Ramanand and Kabir were contemporaries. Baba Guru Nanak and the Sacred Word. Baba Guru Nanak was born in a village called Nankana Sahib near Ravi in Punjab in 1469. He trained to be an accountant and studied Persian. He was married at a young age, but he spent most of his time among Sufi and Bhaktas. He also travelled widely. Teachings of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. His teachings are well reflected in his hymns. These hymns suggest that he advocated a form of Nirguna Bhakti. He rejected sacrifices, ritual baths, image worship and the scriptures of Hindu and Muslim. According to him, the Absolute or Rab had no gender, no form. He proposed a simple way to connect to the divine by remembering the divine name. He expressed his ideas through hymns called Shabad in Punjabi. the language of the region, and sang with different raga. He organized his followers into a community. He set up rule for congregational worship, Sangat. He appointed one of his disciples, Angad, to succeed him as the presbyter. Guru Nanak did not want to establish a new religion. After his death, his followers consolidated their own practices to form a distinct community. The fifth Guru, Guru Arjan, compiled Guru Nanak hymns along with those of his four successors and other religious poets like Baba Farid, Ravidas and Kabir in the Adi Granth Sahib. These hymns, called Gurbani, are composed in various languages. The 10th Guru, Guru Gobind Singh, included the composition of the 9th Guru, Guru Tegh Bahadur. This scripture was called the Guru Granth Sahib. Guru Gobind Singh also led the foundation of the Khalsa Panth. He also defined its 5 symbols: uncut hair, a dagger, a pair of shorts, a comb, and a steel bangle. It was under the leadership of Guru Gobind Singh that the community became a socio-religious and military force. At last, Mirabai, the devotee princess. Mirabai was the best known women poet within the Bhakti tradition. He was a Rajput princess from Marta in the Marwar. She was married to a prince of the Sisodia clan of Mewar against her wishes. She defied her husband and no submit to the traditional role of wife and mother. She recognized Krishna, the avatar of Vishnu, as her lover. Her in-laws tried to poison her, but she escaped and lived as wandering singer, composing song with intense expressions of emotion. Her most famous preceptor was Redas, a leather worker. It shows her defiance of the norms of caste society. She had donned the white robes of a widow or the saffron robe of the renouncer. Although she did not attract a sect of group of followers, she has been recognized as a source of inspiration for centuries. We get information about her from the bhajanas attributed to her. Reconstructing histories of religious tradition. Historians used a variety of sources to reconstruct histories of religious tradition. These include stupas, monasteries, and temples. Historians also draw on textual sources including devotional literature and hagiographies. These sources enable historians to understand certain religious beliefs and practices. They range from the simple direct language of the Vachanas of Baswana to the ornate language of the Farman of the Mughal emperors. Understanding each type of text requires different skill. Historians have to acquire familiarity with several languages and to be aware of the subtle variation in style that characterize each type. Thank you, students.